Mr. Bennet stood at the front of his classroom, his fingers tapping irritably against the desk as he scanned the faces of his students. The room was filled with tension. He had just given a lecture on translating Latin, a subject he prided himself on. But today, the students were all struggling. Emily, the quiet one in the front row, had her hand half raised, her face flushed as she stumbled over the passage. Jared, in the back, scratched his head and looked around, hoping someone else would speak up. The rest of the class was similarly lost, each face reflecting the same confusion. Mr. Bennet could feel the frustration building in his chest. He had tried everything, slowly explaining each line, breaking down the grammar, even offering the students multiple chances. But nothing worked. The words seemed to swim before their eyes, the complex Latin syntax too much for them to handle. He let out a long sigh, rubbing his temples as he muttered under his breath, "How can they not get this? It's simple. It's the foundation of all modern languages. Why is it so hard for them?" The words echoed in his mind, mingling with the self-doubt he had tried to push aside for years. Mr. Bennet prided himself on his intellect, on his ability to teach with clarity and authority. Yet today he felt powerless. The students just weren't getting it. Was it his fault? Was he failing them? He turned to the board, writing out another example. His hands moved mechanically, but his mind raced. The bell would ring soon. He didn't have the time to fix this today. Mr. Bennet couldn't afford failure, not to his students, not to his colleagues, and certainly not to himself. Emily finally spoke up, her voice soft but filled with hesitation. "I think I know the first part of the sentence, but I'm not sure what happens after emperor." She glanced at the others, hoping for a lifeline, but Jared and the others were just as lost. Mr. Bennet looked at them with a mixture of disappointment and frustration. "Come on, people. You've had all week to prepare. This is basics stuff. If you don't grasp this, how will you manage more advanced texts?" His tone was sharper than usual, but he couldn't hide the irritation in his voice. He paced across the room, glancing at their blank expressions. He could feel the weight of his own expectations pressing down on him. These were students he'd carefully selected for their intellectual potential. He had put in the effort to teach them the intricacies of language, to show them that learning a foreign tongue was like unlocking a new world. But here they were, struggling with what should have been a simple translation. His patience was wearing thin. Mr. Bennet paused at the front of the room, letting the silence hang in the air. His eyes landed on Emily again, and for a brief moment he saw something in her expression, a flicker of doubt. That one look caused a pang in his chest. He felt guilty. Was he pushing them too hard? But then the door creaked open, and he turned to see Ms. Harper, the janitor, walking into the classroom. She wasn't even looking at him. She was simply pushing her mop bucket past the students, silently cleaning up the edges of the room. Her presence was an afterthought in his mind, but there was something about it, something in the way she walked, purposeful and unhurried, that caught his attention. As Ms. Harper mopped the floor outside, the faint sound of Mr. Bennet's voice drifted through the open door. He could hear his own frustration leaking into his words as he continued to lecture, growing increasingly sharp. "It's not hard. What is so difficult about this?" His voice was louder now, filled with irritation. Ms. Harper paused mid-step. She had heard that tone before, not just from Mr. Bennet, but from others, people who thought that because they had a degree, they were the ones who knew everything. She had been around the school long enough to hear the echoes of intellectual pride. But something in Mr. Bennet's voice felt different today. There was a weariness to it, a crack in his confidence that wasn't usually there. She stood still for a moment, considering whether to stay out of it or intervene. Ms. Harper wasn't a teacher. She knew her place, always had. She was just the janitor, the one who quietly cleaned the classrooms after hours, the one who could never hope to be acknowledged for anything beyond that. But something about the way Mr. Bennet was handling the class stirred her. She had worked at the school for years, cleaning the same classrooms, hearing the same lectures, observing the students' struggles and their successes. She had picked up a lot over the years, more than people might realize. The words spilled out before she could stop them. "Maybe you're not explaining it right, Mr. Bennet." She hadn't meant to say it out loud, but it was already too late. She kept mopping, trying to act casual, as though her words had been an accidental part of the sound of the bucket swishing against the floor. Inside the classroom, the students froze. Mr. Bennet stopped pacing, his eyes narrowing as he turned to the doorway. Miss Harper was still cleaning, her back to him, but that one simple comment, it caught him off guard. He could feel a twinge of irritation. Why was Miss Harper speaking up? Who was she to suggest how he should teach? Mr. Bennet crossed the room quickly, his frustration reaching its peak. He stood at the door, his voice cold. "What did you say, Miss Harper?" Miss Harper didn't turn around right away, as if she were trying to avoid the confrontation. But the class was quiet now, all eyes fixed on her. Miss Harper continued to mop, then finally spoke, her tone calm and measured. "I said, maybe you're not explaining it right. I've seen a lot of people struggle with language, and I've picked up a few things over the years. Maybe you could try breaking it down differently." The words hung in the air. Mr. Bennet stood frozen for a moment, stunned by her bluntness. He opened his mouth, ready to snap at her, but he stopped himself. This wasn't how things usually went. This wasn't how he was used to being spoken to, especially not by someone in Miss Harper's position. "Mr. Bennet, and what exactly would you suggest, Ms. Harper? How should I explain it? I have a degree in classical languages. I don't think I need your help." But Ms. Harper didn't back down. She turned slowly, meeting his gaze with an expression that was as calm as it was resolute. "I didn't say you needed help. I said maybe there's another way to explain it." She shrugged nonchalantly, as if it were the simplest thing in the world. "But you're the expert, Mr. Bennet. I'm just the janitor." The irony wasn't lost on the class. Mr. Bennet felt his pride prickle at her words, but for some reason he didn't feel the usual defensive anger. Instead, there was a strange curiosity simmering beneath the surface. Ms. Harper had an insight, an understanding of people that he hadn't considered, and that, in a strange way, unnerved him more than anything else. Mr. Bennet couldn't believe what he was about to do. It was absurd, really, and yet there he was, standing in front of Miss Harper, challenging her to do something he knew she had no formal training in. "All right, then," he said, his voice laced with sarcasm. "If you think you can do it better, then translate this for the class. Show us how it's done." He gestured toward the whiteboard, where the Latin text still loomed large and unsolved. The class was eerily silent, watching the tension unfold. Miss Harper paused for a moment, her eyes narrowing as she surveyed the room. And then, with a quiet resolve, she walked up to the whiteboard. Without any hesitation, Miss Harper stood in front of the board and picked up a marker. She stared at the Latin passage for a moment, her expression unreadable, and then began writing. The class watched in awe. Miss Harper spoke in a calm, deliberate voice, breaking down each part of the sentence, explaining not just the words, but the meaning behind them. She didn't rush, didn't stumble. Every word was deliberate, insightful, and sharp. Her translation wasn't just accurate, it revealed a depth that Mr. Bennet hadn't considered. She explained the historical context, the significance of the phrases, the nuances of the ancient Roman political system embedded in the text. Her interpretation brought a richness to the passage that Mr. Bennet had missed in his own teaching. When she finished, the silence was deafening. Mr. Bennet stood there, stunned. The students didn't dare speak. All they could do was stare at Ms. Harper, her face calm, her demeanor composed. Mr. Bennet, for the first time in a long while, felt small. The silence that followed Miss Harper's flawless translation was heavy. Mr. Bennet stood at the front of the classroom, his mouth slightly agape, as he struggled to process what had just happened. Miss Harper's calm and confident delivery had not only captured the meaning of the text, but had also provided a depth of understanding that Mr. Bennet hadn't considered. She had woven in historical context, providing an insight into ancient Roman politics, something Mr. Bennet himself had struggled to explain. Her translation was more than accurate, it was masterful. Jared was the first to break the silence, whispering to Emily in disbelief. "Jared, Did she just blow Mr. Bennet out of the water? Emily, still wide-eyed, nodded slowly. Emily, I think so. The entire class seemed to share the same stunned expression. They had never seen Miss Harper in this light, never imagined that the janitor, who usually stayed out of the spotlight, could wield such knowledge and clarity. Mr. Bennet blinked. His pride hurt more than he wanted to admit. He had always prided himself on being the intellectual authority in the room, the one with the answers. But in this moment, Miss Harper had proven him wrong. She had not only understood the material, she had made it come alive in a way he hadn't. Mr. Bennet took a deep breath, attempting to regain control, but it wasn't easy. He hadn't expected this. "Well, I guess I stand corrected," he said, his voice tight. He turned back to the class, trying to mask the surprise in his tone. "But don't get any ideas. This was a one-time thing." Yet the weight of the moment lingered. The students had just witnessed a quiet triumph, one that had nothing to do with degrees, academic accolades, or titles. And Mr. Bennet knew that no matter how he tried to brush it off, it had shaken him to his core. Later that day, Mr. Bennet found himself alone in the staff room, nursing a cup of coffee, but unable to focus. His mind kept drifting back to Ms. Harper's translation, how seamlessly she had navigated the complex Latin and brought out meanings that had eluded him. He couldn't shake the feeling of embarrassment that had settled deep in his chest. He'd always prided himself on being the authority in the room, the one everyone turned to for answers. But now, Miss Harper had not only outshone him in front of his students, she had done so with an ease that made him feel like a fraud. Mr. Bennet stared at the half-empty coffee cup in his hands, his fingers twitching as he tried to suppress the unease bubbling inside him. How could he have been so blind, he thought. How could I have dismissed her like that? The realization hit him hard. His intellectual arrogance, his narrow view of what constituted intelligence, had led him to belittle someone who clearly had more to offer than he could have ever imagined. He felt a strange mix of guilt and admiration, but most of all, a quiet shame. How many times had he walked past Miss Harper without acknowledging the depth of her intelligence? How many times had he unconsciously assumed that only those with degrees, titles, and certifications had real knowledge? And now Miss Harper had shown him, in the most humbling way possible, that intellect wasn't confined to those with formal credentials. It could reside in anyone, no matter their job title, their background, or their life circumstances. The next day, Mr. Bennet stood at the front of the classroom again, the Latin textbook open before him. But his approach had changed. The walls of his intellectual arrogance had begun to crumble. He no longer felt like the unquestioned expert in the room. He was learning from Miss Harper, learning from his students, and most of all, learning from his own pride. Mr. Bennet turned to the board and began breaking down the Latin passage for his students. But this time, he wasn't just speaking from theory or rote memorization. He was speaking with a new perspective, a perspective that embraced the idea that translation, and indeed teaching itself, wasn't just about rote learning or textbook rules. It was about understanding, listening, and seeing the bigger picture. As he explained the nuances of the text, he paused occasionally, allowing his students to engage, to ask questions. He didn't feel the need to rush or dominate the conversation anymore. Instead, he asked them for their thoughts, for their interpretations, giving them space to explore the material in their own way. The students, sensing the shift, began to open up more. They asked questions they wouldn't have asked the previous day, offering their own thoughts about the passage. It wasn't just Mr. Bennet leading them anymore. It was a collaborative effort. For the first time in a long while, the classroom felt alive with ideas and discussion. When the bell rang, Mr. Bennet felt a strange sense of peace settle over him. He had done something different today, something he hadn't expected to do. He had allowed himself to be vulnerable, to admit that maybe he didn't have all the answers, and that was okay. As the students filed out of the classroom, one of them, Emily, stopped at the door, looking back at him with a thoughtful expression. "Emily, "You've been different today, Mr. Bennet. It was nice." Her words caught him off guard, but Mr. Bennet smiled, a genuine smile this time. "Mr. Bennet, thanks, Emily, that means a lot." He watched her leave, feeling a sense of accomplishment that went beyond the translation or the lesson he had taught. It was about something deeper. It was about growth, both for him and for his students. And in that moment, he realized that Ms. Harper had given him something priceless, a new way of seeing the world, and more importantly, a new way of seeing people. Emily, Jared, and a few other students gathered in the courtyard after class, discussing the lesson. They had noticed the change in Mr. Bennet, the way he interacted with them, the way he allowed them to express their thoughts without fear of judgment. It was different, and they could all feel it. Jared, who had always found Mr. Bennet intimidating, spoke first. "Jared, did you notice how he actually listened today? I've never seen him like that before." Emily, nodding thoughtfully, added, "Emily, yeah, and he didn't just shut us down when we asked questions. It's like he actually cared about what we thought. It was nice." Jared grinned. "Jared, I think he learned something. Maybe even more than we did." They both glanced at Ms. Harper, who was walking past with her cleaning supplies. Emily caught her eye and gave her a small, grateful smile. Ms. Harper returned the gesture, her expression as calm and collected as ever. The students had seen it, the quiet power of Ms. Harper, the janitor, who had unlocked something in Mr. Bennet that they never thought possible, and in doing so, she had changed the classroom dynamic forever. Later that day, Mr. Bennet and Ms. Harper sat at a small table in the back of the classroom. The students had left, and the room was quieter now. The awkwardness that had once existed between them was gone, replaced by something far more comfortable: mutual respect. "Mr. Bennet, I can't believe how much I've learned from you." "Ms. Harper, I spent all these years thinking I had all the answers. I was wrong." He looked at her, a new sense of gratitude in his eyes. "I owe you an apology. You've changed the way I think about teaching, about learning." Ms. Harper didn't respond immediately. She simply leaned back in her chair, looking at him thoughtfully. "Ms. Harper, sometimes the best lessons come from unexpected places, Mr. Bennet, but you've always been willing to learn. That's what makes you a good teacher." There was a pause. Then Mr. Bennet smiled, the weight of his earlier pride lifting off his shoulders. He had learned something crucial, not just about teaching, but about himself. "Mr. Bennet, thank you, Ms. Harper, for everything." Ms. Harper nodded, giving him a small but genuine smile. "Ms. Harper, it's just the beginning, Mr. Bennet. Just the beginning." The words hung in the air between them. Mr. Bennet realized she was right. This wasn't just the end of a chapter. It was the start of something new, something neither of them had expected. And for the first time in a long while, Mr. Bennet felt ready for whatever came next. Mr. Bennet sat at the table in the teacher's lounge, a cold cup of coffee in front of him. The noise of the other teachers chatting around him barely registered. His mind was elsewhere. He was still reeling from the events of earlier that day. Ms. Harper's unexpected translation, her calm confidence in the face of his mockery. How had he let this happen? How had he, someone so certain of his own expertise, been so wrong about Ms. Harper? He stared at the coffee cup, but it was as if the cup was staring back at him, mocking his own arrogance. He was the teacher, the one with the degree, the one who had been trusted with these students' futures. And yet, it was Miss Harper, the janitor, who had shown him the true meaning of knowledge. Mr. Bennet ran a hand through his hair in frustration. His pride was wounded, but even more than that, there was an uncomfortable feeling stirring within him as something unfamiliar. Miss Harper hadn't just corrected him, she had revealed a truth he had never wanted to see. Intelligence was not reserved for those with degrees or titles. It could be found in unexpected places, in people like Ms. Harper, who had taught herself quietly and steadily, without any fanfare. Mr. Bennet shifted uncomfortably in his chair, guilt gnawing at him. What did that say about me, he thought. He had spent so much time thinking that his years of study made him superior, but Ms. Harper had done the one thing he never thought anyone could do. She made him feel small. But beneath the guilt, A spark of something else began to grow, something that had been buried under layers of pride for years. Maybe it was time for him to face the truth. Maybe it was time for him to learn. The next morning, Mr. Bennet found himself standing outside the classroom, waiting for Ms. Harper to pass by. He had already spent the last few hours pacing the teacher's lounge, trying to sort out his thoughts. He had to apologize. He had to admit that he had been wrong, not just about her, but about everything he had thought he knew. He straightened his tie and cleared his throat. As Miss Harper walked past, pushing her mop bucket, he called out to her, "Mr. Bennet, Miss Harper, could I speak with you for a moment?" She stopped, looking at him curiously. Miss Harper hadn't expected him to seek her out. She had heard the rumors of his mockery, seen the way he dismissed her presence in the past. But there was something different in his voice now, an openness she hadn't heard before. Mr. Bennet hesitated for a moment, then spoke in a voice that was quieter than usual. "Mr. Bennet, I owe you an apology, Miss Harper, for everything. I was wrong, and I shouldn't have treated you the way I did." He took a deep breath, the weight of his words settling between them. "Mr. Bennet, you were right. You've been right all along." There was a long pause. Miss Harper didn't respond immediately. Instead, she looked at him, her expression unreadable. For a moment, Mr. Bennet wondered if he had gone too far, if his apology was too little, too late. But then finally she spoke. "Miss Harper, it's all right. People see things how they want to see them. You've got your way of thinking, I've got mine, but I appreciate you saying that. It means something." Mr. Bennet nodded, feeling a strange weight lift from his shoulders. It wasn't a perfect apology, but it was a start. He had taken the first step towards something he hadn't even realized he needed: humility. A few days later, Mr. Bennet found himself in the same classroom with Miss Harper, the walls lined with books and Latin texts. It was early, the room still dim with morning light, and they were the only two there. Mr. Bennet had asked Miss Harper if she would sit down and talk with him after class. He had wanted to know more about her, more about how she had come to be so skilled with languages. Miss Harper sat across from him, her back straight, her hands folded calmly in front of her. She wasn't nervous, but Mr. Bennet could sense a slight hesitation in her demeanor. Mr. Bennet: "So, Miss Harper, I've been wondering, how did you learn all of this? The languages, the translations? It's incredible." Miss Harper gave a small smile, her eyes softening. She had never shared this with anyone at the school. She had always kept her intellectual pursuits to herself, preferring to stay in the background. But now, with Mr. Bennet, there was no reason to hide. "Miss Harper, I never had the chance to go to college, family stuff, but I've always loved languages. I taught myself mostly, books, tapes, online courses. When I wasn't working, I'd pick up a language here and there, just for fun. Latin, Greek, French. They were always just something to escape into, you know? A way to make sense of the world around me." Her voice was steady, but Mr. Bennet could sense the quiet pride she had in herself. She wasn't boasting. She was simply stating the truth, unpretentious and matter of fact. "Mr. Bennet, that's incredible. I never would have guessed." He paused, considering her words. "I thought I knew everything about language, about teaching, but I had no idea how much I've been missing." Ms. Harper shrugged, a soft laugh escaping her lips. "Ms. Harper, I don't have the fancy degrees, Mr. Bennet, but sometimes that's an advantage. You see things differently when you don't have the same rules to follow. That's how I've learned. I don't think there's only one way to do it." Her words struck him deeper than he expected. Ms. Harper wasn't just humble, she was wise, in a way that he had never allowed himself to be. She had learned through persistence and resilience, not through formal schooling. He couldn't help but feel a profound sense of respect for her. As the weeks passed, Mr. Bennet found himself increasingly drawn to Ms. Harper's way of thinking. They spent hours together in the school library, combing through ancient texts and working on translations. Mr. Bennet had expected their work to be strictly academic, but soon he realized that there was something more to their sessions than just words on a page. Ms. Harper had a way of looking at language that went beyond grammar and syntax. She brought out the soul of each text, uncovering layers of meaning that even Mr. Bennet, with his years of training, had overlooked. One afternoon, as they worked together on a particularly difficult passage, Mr. Bennet stopped and looked at her. "Mr. Bennet, I never realized how much I've been missing in my own teaching. You make things feel alive. It's like you're seeing the texts as people, not just as words." Ms. Harper didn't respond immediately. Instead, she tapped the edge of the book thoughtfully. "Ms. Harper, it's all about perspective. Most people read words and think they're just there, but I've learned that language has a pulse. It has a rhythm, a heartbeat. That's what makes it real." Mr. Bennet sat back in his chair, taking in her words. It was so simple, yet it felt like a revelation. For the first time, he felt like he was seeing the world of language not just as a teacher, but as a student. One evening, after a long day of lessons, Mr. Bennet and Ms. Harper stayed late to work on their translation project. The school was quiet now, the hallways empty, and the only sound was the quiet rustle of pages turning. Mr. Bennet had always been a night owl, often staying up late into the night to prepare lessons, but now, with Ms. Harper, the late hours felt different, more purposeful. As they sat side by side, flipping through a Greek text, their conversation turned more personal. Mr. Bennet asked Ms. Harper about her life, her family, and what had led her to work at the school. She was open, but there was a quiet sadness in her eyes when she spoke about her past. "Ms. Harper, life doesn't always give you the opportunities you want, but you learn to make do with what you've got. I've never regretted my decisions. Though, I just wish more people could see the value in things that don't fit the traditional mold." Mr. Bennet looked at her, sensing the weight of her words. "Mr. Bennet, you're right. I've spent so much of my life following the rules, following what's expected. But maybe it's time I started breaking some of them." The room was filled with a quiet understanding between them. In that moment, Mr. Bennet realized how much he had underestimated Ms. Harper, not just as a translator, but as a person, and how much more he still had to learn. Despite his growing respect for Ms. Harper, Mr. Bennet couldn't shake the doubt that lingered in the back of his mind. He had begun to question everything he had once thought about teaching, about language, about intelligence. But there was a nagging voice inside of him, a voice that said he was still the expert, that Ms. Harper, despite her talents, was still just the janitor. One morning, as he was reviewing some notes for class, Mr. Bennet found himself questioning their work. What if this was all a fluke, he thought? What if I'm just giving her credit because she's made me feel guilty about my own arrogance? But as he glanced over at Ms. Harper, sitting across from him, quietly reading a text, the doubt began to dissipate. She wasn't just filling in gaps. She was offering something truly valuable. Her insights weren't just right, they were transformative, and Mr. Bennet knew it. He sighed and put his notes down, looking at Ms. Harper. "Mr. Bennet, you've shown me something I've never seen before." Ms. Harper looked up, surprised by the sincerity in his voice. "Ms. Harper, I'm just here to help, Mr. Bennet. You're the one who's been open enough to see it." That was all he needed to hear. The week had gone by in a blur. Mr. Bennet and Ms. Harper had been preparing for the academic conference in which they would present their translation work. Ms. Harper had already made a lasting impression on Mr. Bennet, but now, with the formal challenge of presenting in front of an academic audience, the pressure was building. The nerves were evident in Mr. Bennet's face as he reviewed their notes for the umpteenth time. The conference room was set up with large tables, and there was a palpable hum of anticipation in the air. Dr. Thomas Green, a well-known linguist, was among the panelists, and Mr. Bennet couldn't shake the feeling that he was walking into the lion's den. He knew Miss Harper had the skills, but Mr. Bennet wasn't entirely sure if he could match the intellect and gravitas of the other scholars present. Miss Harper was calm, too calm, in fact, almost unnervingly so. She stood by a table in the corner of the room, reviewing her notes with quiet focus. Mr. Bennet could see her confidence. She wasn't afraid. She was more than ready. As they approached the front of the room to present, Mr. Bennet's mind raced, but Miss Harper gave him a reassuring glance. "Ms. Harper, we've got this. Let's just stick to what we know." Mr. Bennet gave a nod, his breath coming a little easier now. She was right, they had worked hard for this. It was time to show everyone, especially themselves, what they were capable of. The presentation began. Mr. Bennet spoke first, detailing the background of their project and explaining the importance of classical translations. He was good at this part, giving the academic framework, speaking with the confident authority of someone who had spent years in the field. But then it was Ms. Harper's turn. As she took the podium, Mr. Bennet stepped back, watching her with a mix of admiration and nervous excitement. Ms. Harper was poised. She spoke clearly, her voice rich with understanding and passion. She explained their work on a particularly difficult Latin passage, showing how their translation not only uncovered the literal meaning, but also revealed deeper political and social implications hidden within the text. Dr. Thomas Green, one of the panelists, raised an eyebrow as he listened. He was skeptical at first. After all, Ms. Harper was not a traditionally trained academic, but her insights were undeniable. She didn't just translate the text. She interpreted it with the depth of someone who had lived with the material, someone who understood not just the words, but the essence of the culture behind them. When she finished, the room was silent for a moment. Then Dr. Green spoke. "Dr. Green, I must admit I didn't expect such clarity. Your interpretation adds a layer to this text that many scholars have missed. Remarkable work, Ms. Harper." Mr. Bennet stood in awe. He had known she was good, but hearing it from someone of Dr. Green's stature made it real. Ms. Harper had proven herself beyond any doubt. After the session, as the conference attendees mingled, Ms. Harper was surrounded by scholars and academics who were eager to speak. With her, Mr. Bennet watched from a distance, a proud smile spreading across his face. This was the moment he had never imagined would come. A janitor, whom he had once dismissed as just the cleaning lady, now being sought out by some of the most respected figures in the field of linguistics. Dr. Green approached Ms. Harper, shaking her hand warmly. "Dr. Green, your interpretation of the text was groundbreaking. I would love to collaborate on a project sometime. There are few who bring such a unique perspective to the work." Ms. Harper smiled, grateful but humble. "Ms. Harper, I'd be honored, Dr. Green, but I'm just glad I could contribute." Mr. Bennet stepped forward, unable to contain his admiration. "Mr. Bennet, you were incredible, Ms. Harper. I knew you were good, but I never imagined—" He trailed off, at a loss for words. He couldn't find the right ones. He was simply in awe of her. Miss Harper glanced at him, her eyes softening. "Miss Harper, I've always known what I could do. It just took the right moment for someone to see it." Mr. Bennet realized the truth in her words. She had always known her worth. It was he who had been blind to it, but now he could see it clearly. And the world was beginning to see it too. Back at the school, after the conference, Mr. Bennet and Miss Harper sat together in the empty classroom. They were quiet at first, both of them processing the whirlwind of events that had unfolded. "Mr. Bennet, I still can't believe what just happened. I mean, the conference, the recognition, it's all so overwhelming." "Ms. Harper, it's just the beginning, Mr. Bennet. The conference was great, but I'm not done. There's so much more I want to do. So much more I can offer." Mr. Bennet nodded, his mind whirring with possibilities. He had always seen himself as a teacher, someone who shared his knowledge with others. But now he was seeing something different. He was learning. Miss Harper was showing him what it meant to truly teach, to truly share knowledge. It wasn't just about talking at people. It was about listening, about seeing potential where others couldn't, about helping others realize that they could contribute something valuable. "Mr. Bennet, you've taught me more than I ever thought I would learn. I thought I had it all figured out, but I was wrong." Miss Harper smiled, her expression warm and knowing. "Miss Harper, we all have something to learn, Mr. Bennet. It's just a matter of being open enough to see it." Their conversation lingered, a quiet moment of mutual respect between two people who had once seen each other as opposites, but were now equals in their pursuit of knowledge. The following week, Principal Harris called Ms. Harper into her office. Mr. Bennett had been sitting in on a meeting about a new department initiative when he saw Ms. Harper walk in. She was dressed in a clean professional outfit, her usual janitor uniform replaced by something that showed her rising status. Principal Harris looked at Ms. Harper with admiration. "Principal Harris, we've been following your work and, frankly, I'm impressed. I'd like to offer you the opportunity to teach a guest lecture series on translation and language here at the school." Ms. Harper blinked in surprise. She had never expected anything like this. She had always kept her work quiet, hidden behind her janitor's duties. But now, here was Principal Harris, offering her a chance to speak, to be heard. It felt surreal. "Ms. Harper, I don't know what to say." Principal Harris, "Just say yes. You've earned this, Ms. Harper, and we want you to be part of the future here at Langston." The offer was one Ms. Harper hadn't even dreamed of. She had always wanted to be more, but this was more than she could have imagined. She nodded, her voice steady but full of emotion. "Ms. Harper, yes, I would love to." Mr. Bennett, who had been watching from the doorway, smiled to himself. He had seen this moment coming, but even so, it was a revelation. He had helped Ms. Harper unlock her potential, but she had shown him a new path for himself as well. The final scene of the chapter found Mr. Bennett and Ms. Harper sitting side by side in the school library, reviewing a new translation project. The dynamic had shifted. There was no longer a teacher-student divide. Instead, there was a sense of collaboration, mutual respect, and understanding. "Mr. Bennett, I'm proud of you, Ms. Harper, and I'm proud of what we've accomplished. Together, I've learned more from you than I ever could have imagined." "Ms. Harper, we've both learned, Mr. Bennett. That's the beauty of it. You've shown me the importance of sharing knowledge, and I've shown you that intelligence comes in many forms." They smiled at each other, a quiet acknowledgement of how far they had come, from a place of stereotypes and judgment to one of respect and collaboration. Mr. Bennett had once believed that his path was the only one worth following, but now he saw that everyone had something valuable to offer. The chapter ended with Mr. Bennett looking at Ms. Harper, not just as a colleague, but as a true partner in learning, a partner who had helped him discover the power of humility and the beauty of second chances. The day had arrived. Mr. Bennett could hardly sit still in the conference room as he prepared to present with Ms. Harper. The room buzzed with the energy of several scholars and professors, all eagerly awaiting the next presentation. The air was thick with the scent of coffee and anticipation. Mr. Bennett was dressed in his usual crisp formal attire, his tie perfectly adjusted and his shirt impeccably pressed. Beside him, Ms. Harper sat calmly, her posture relaxed but poised. It was hard for Mr. Bennett not to notice how different Ms. Harper looked today. Gone was the janitor's uniform. Instead, she wore a simple yet elegant blouse paired with slacks. There was no doubt now that she was more than capable, more than anyone had ever given her credit for. Mr. Bennett had spent weeks preparing for this moment, yet the nerves he had always managed to suppress now clawed at him. He couldn't help but feel both excited and anxious. This was it. Ms. Harper was finally going to be recognized for her brilliance. But how would the world react to someone like her? Would they be ready to accept that Ms. Harper, the quiet janitor, could hold her own against seasoned scholars? As the other speakers finished their presentations, Mr. Bennett gave Ms. Harper a reassuring glance. She nodded silently in return, her calm confidence contrasting with his visible tension. He couldn't help but admire her composure. For all his intellectual training, he had never felt this level of uncertainty, but he wasn't going to let that stop them. It was time for the world to see Ms. Harper the way he now saw her, as a brilliant scholar in her own right. When their turn finally came, Mr. Bennett stood first to introduce their work. His voice wavered slightly at first, but he quickly found his rhythm as he described the intricacies of their collaborative translation project. The audience listened intently, intrigued by the unusual pairing of an academic and a janitor. The moderator introduced them formally, and Mr. Bennet stepped up to the podium with the same professional poise he had always exuded. Yet, as he glanced to the side at Miss Harper, something shifted. She stood with the quiet strength of someone who knew their worth. It was clear that the audience wasn't quite sure what to expect. There were murmurs of confusion, maybe even skepticism, as they prepared to hear from someone who had, until this point, been nothing more than a quiet figure cleaning the school after hours. But Mr. Bennet wasn't bothered by it. He was proud of the work they had done together, proud of the person Miss Harper had become in his eyes. Mr. Bennet began the presentation by laying the groundwork of their project, explaining the historical importance of the Latin texts they had worked on. But it wasn't the translation itself that would captivate the audience. It was the way Miss Harper would bring it to life. Mr. Bennet introduced her as the key player, someone whose insight and experience had turned what could have been a simple translation project into something far more profound. Miss Harper stepped forward, her presence commanding the room in a way Mr. Bennet had never expected. The silence that had greeted her moments before now shifted, and there was an air of curiosity in the audience as she began to speak. She explained their method, not in dry academic terms, but with a grounded, real-world perspective that made the ancient text feel relevant. Ms. Harper wove historical context and modern interpretation together with ease. As she spoke, Mr. Bennet watched, awestruck by her clarity and insight. Her voice resonated with confidence, yet there was no trace of arrogance. She spoke not as a scholar with a formal title, but as someone who had learned through experience and observation. The audience began to see what Mr. Bennet had already recognized, a quiet genius hidden in plain sight. The room was quiet as Miss Harper concluded her portion of the presentation. There was a brief, stunned silence, but as Dr. Thomas Green, the panelist known for his sharp critiques, stood to speak, it became clear that Miss Harper had left an impression. Dr. Green, who had initially seemed skeptical of Miss Harper's qualifications, now approached her with a serious expression. "Dr. Green, that was impressive. Your interpretation offers a new lens on this text. You've brought an insight to this translation that is not only accurate, but richly layered. I hadn't considered the implications of this passage until you pointed them out." Miss Harper smiled softly, offering a polite, humble nod. Miss Harper: "Thank you, Dr. Green. I believe context and understanding go hand in hand with language. It's about seeing the people behind the words." The audience, which had been tentative at first, now leaned in, captivated. Dr. Green, now fully acknowledging her brilliance, turned to the panel and then back to the crowd. "Dr. Green, I don't think we have a new perspective on this ancient text thanks to Ms. Harper. I would be interested in hearing more of your work in the future." The room erupted into soft applause, a sign that Ms. Harper had earned the recognition she had long deserved. Mr. Bennet couldn't contain the smile spreading across his face. He had been right to believe in her. Ms. Harper had proven herself, not only to him, but to everyone in the room. As the session concluded, Mr. Bennet stood off to the side, watching Ms. Harper engage with the audience. Scholars crowded around her, eager to ask questions, discuss the nuances of her insights, and learn more about her approach. Mr. Bennet couldn't help but feel an overwhelming sense of pride. He had always thought that his work, his education, his career, these were the things that defined him. But now, standing back and watching Ms. Harper shine in the spotlight, he realized how wrong he had been. The pride he felt wasn't just because of their shared success. It was because he had learned something valuable about himself. He had always defined success by titles, by degrees, by professional accolades, but now he saw that true success wasn't about credentials. It was about passion, perseverance, and the willingness to learn, no matter where you came from. As Ms. Harper finished speaking with the other panelists, Mr. Bennet approached her, his voice soft but filled with gratitude. "Mr. Bennet, I don't think I've ever been so proud. What you've done today, it's incredible. I've never seen anything like it." Miss Harper turned to face him, a quiet smile tugging at the corner of her lips. "Miss Harper, I couldn't have done it without you, Mr. Bennet. It's all about the right time and the right place. We've both had our second chances." In that moment, Mr. Bennet understood the full weight of her words. He had once thought that his education and his position as a teacher were what made him important. But now he saw that the real power came from collaboration, from humility, and from recognizing the potential in others, even in people like Miss Harper, who had been written off by so many. Back at the school, after the whirlwind of the conference, Mr. Bennet and Miss Harper found themselves in the now familiar classroom. The room was empty of students, and the hum of the fluorescent lights filled the silence between them. Mr. Bennet sat at the desk, still processing the events of the past few days. The conference had been a turning point, not just for Miss Harper, but for him as well. He had learned more about teaching, about humility, and about what it really meant to be an educator than he ever had in the classroom. Miss Harper sat across from him, her calm demeanor never wavering. She looked at him as though waiting for him to speak first. "Mr. Bennet, I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about how intelligence doesn't come from titles or degrees. I've spent my whole career thinking that those things mattered most, but they don't, do they?" Miss Harper shook her head, a small but knowing smile on her face. Miss Harper: "No, they don't, but that's not always easy to see when you're caught up in the system. It's about more than just knowledge. It's about how you use it." The words resonated deeply with Mr. Bennet. He had spent his life believing that titles were the key to success. But Miss Harper had shown him the truth, that the real key was in sharing knowledge, in seeing the value in others, and in understanding that everyone has something valuable to contribute. The next day, Miss Harper was called into Principal Harris's office. Mr. Bennet had no idea what was going on, but when he saw Miss Harper enter, he could sense that something was different. Principal Harris was sitting behind her desk, a smile on her face. "Principal Harris, Miss Harper, I've been following your work closely, and I have to say I'm impressed. After seeing your presentation at the conference, I'd like to offer you the opportunity to guest lecture here at Langston High. You've shown an incredible understanding of the texts, and I think our students would benefit from your insights." Ms. Harper was silent for a moment, surprised by the offer. It was more than she had ever expected, more than she had ever allowed herself to dream. "Ms. Harper, I don't know what to say. I've never imagined this would happen." Principal Harris: "You've earned this, Miss Harper, and I'd love for you to be part of our academic community here. What do you say?" Miss Harper looked at Mr. Bennet, who was standing by the door, smiling proudly. She nodded slowly, her voice steady. "Miss Harper, yes, I would love to." For Miss Harper it was a new beginning, one she had earned, and one that would allow her to break free of the limitations others had placed on her. And for Mr. Bennet, it was the confirmation of what he had known all along, that everyone, no matter their background, has hidden potential waiting to be uncovered. The school was buzzing with excitement after the conference. Mr. Bennet and Miss Harper had made quite an impact. Miss Harper, especially, was being treated differently. She wasn't just the janitor anymore. She was a respected scholar in her own right. As the students gathered in the courtyard for lunch, there was an air of admiration and curiosity. Emily and Jared, two of Mr. Bennet's students, were sitting at a table, their conversations now focused on the recent events. "Emily, I can't believe Miss Harper did that. She's a genius." Jared: "Yeah, it's crazy. She explained everything so well, way better than I ever thought possible." Emily: "She's a janitor. How is that possible?" Jared shrugged, his mind still trying to process it all. Jared: "Maybe it's just like Mr. Bennet said at the conference. Intelligence comes from more than just degrees." Miss Harper proved that. The students exchanged knowing looks. Miss Harper had, in a sense, changed their entire perspective, not just on learning, but on life itself. The concept of knowledge was no longer confined to textbooks or classrooms. It could be found anywhere, even in the most unexpected places. Miss Harper herself stood nearby, having been invited by the students to join them for lunch. She was initially hesitant, but found herself charmed by the students' genuine respect. As she joined them, Mr. Bennet watched from a distance, feeling a swell of pride. He hadn't just helped Miss Harper find her voice, she had changed the entire school's culture by challenging their preconceived notions of intelligence. The following week, Mr. Bennet stood before his students, his demeanor much different than before. Gone was the rigid, authoritative figure he once was. Today, he was more approachable, more open to dialogue. The classroom felt different, more collaborative. The students sensed the shift immediately. Mr. Bennet, today we're going to approach this translation from a new perspective. We won't just focus on the technical aspects of the text. We'll think about what the authors were feeling when they wrote it, what the context was. It's about more than just translating words. It's about understanding the people who wrote them. Jared raised his hand, excited to contribute. Jared, like what Ms. Harper did at the conference, she didn't just translate the Latin, she told us the story behind it. Mr. Bennet nodded with a smile. Mr. Bennet, exactly, Jared. That's the kind of approach I'm talking about. We're not just students of the text, we're students of the world behind the text. Everyone here has something valuable to offer, and I'm here to listen. The students exchanged glances, impressed. Mr. Bennet had changed. He wasn't just the teacher anymore. He was a collaborator. The shift in his approach opened up a new dynamic in the classroom. The students felt empowered to speak up, to ask questions, and to share their insights. It was clear that Mr. Bennet wasn't just teaching them, he was learning from them as well. One afternoon, Mr. Bennet and Ms. Harper found themselves discussing an especially challenging translation project. They were working on a particularly difficult passage from an ancient Roman text, and the nuances were proving to be difficult to interpret. Ms. Harper was deep in thought, scribbling notes in the margin of the page. Mr. Bennet, ever the academic, offered his usual perspective. Mr. Bennet, we can approach this with the usual method, analyzing the structure of the sentence, breaking down the syntax. But Miss Harper shook her head, her eyes focused on the text. Miss Harper, no, that's too narrow. We're looking at words, but we're not seeing the context. Look at the emotional weight of the sentence. This wasn't just a political statement, it was personal. The author had something to prove. Mr. Bennet blinked, momentarily thrown off by her insight. I hadn't thought of it that way, he admitted. It wasn't that he hadn't considered the context before, but the way Ms. Harper had framed it made him see the passage in a whole new light. He took a deep breath, realizing just how much he still had to learn. Together, they spent the next hour working through the passage, with Ms. Harper offering alternative interpretations and Mr. Bennet challenging her ideas. It wasn't about who was right or wrong. It was about collaboration. They didn't need to compete. They needed to create together. After class one day, Mr. Bennet and Ms. Harper found themselves alone, reflecting on the progress they had made together. Ms. Harper had become not just a collaborator, but a trusted partner in their academic journey. Mr. Bennet couldn't help but think back to where they had started, the skeptic and the janitor, both so different, yet now united in their pursuit of knowledge. Mr. Bennet, you know, I never thought this would happen. I never thought I'd be sitting here working alongside you, learning from you. Ms. Harper gave a soft laugh. Ms. Harper, I don't think either of us expected it, but you've changed, Mr. Bennet. I've seen it. I've seen you learn to listen more, to question your own assumptions. That's not something many people do. Mr. Bennet paused, absorbing her words. Mr. Bennet, you've changed me, Ms. Harper. You've taught me something I didn't know I needed to learn. I spent so many years thinking I had all the answers, but you've shown me that the best teachers are the ones who are still willing to learn. It was a humbling moment. Mr. Bennet had spent so much of his life focused on being the expert, on having the answers, that he had missed the importance of collaboration and humility. But now, working alongside Ms. Harper, He understood the power of learning from others, of embracing different perspectives, and of recognizing the potential in people no one else had bothered to see. After the success of their work together, Principal Harris called Ms. Harper into her office. Mr. Bennet had no idea what was going on, but he could tell by Ms. Harper's expression that something significant was happening. Principal Harris greeted Ms. Harper warmly, her smile broad. "Principal Harris, Miss Harper, after everything we've seen, I believe you deserve a place in the academic community here at Langston. I want to offer you a position to guest lecture for our advanced language classes." The offer took Miss Harper completely by surprise. She had never imagined this, never believed that a janitor like herself could be offered such an opportunity. But Principal Harris had seen the potential in her, just as Mr. Bennet had. "Miss Harper, I don't know what to say. This is more than I ever expected." Principal Harris: "You've earned it, Miss Harper. Your insights into language and translation are invaluable. Our students would benefit immensely from your knowledge." Miss Harper turned to Mr. Bennet, who was standing by the door. He gave her a small nod of encouragement. She looked back at Principal Harris. "Miss Harper, yes, I'll do it. I'd love to." It was an overwhelming moment. Miss Harper had spent years working in the background, unseen by most, but now she was stepping into the light. She had earned her place in the academic world, and there was no turning back. In the final scene of the chapter, Mr. Bennet and Miss Harper sat side by side in the school library, quietly reviewing a new translation project. The once distant relationship between teacher and janitor had blossomed into a deep partnership, built on mutual respect and shared learning. "Mr. Bennet, I'm proud of everything we've accomplished together, Miss Harper. But more than that, I'm proud of what we've taught each other. I didn't know it at the time, but I needed you more than you needed me." Ms. Harper: "We both needed something, Mr. Bennet. We both needed a second chance, and we found it in each other." Mr. Bennet smiled, his heart lighter than it had ever been. He had spent so much time focused on proving himself that he had missed the beauty of learning alongside others, especially someone like Ms. Harper. As they sat there side by side, they shared a quiet moment of acknowledgement, a moment where collaboration had triumphed over competition, where hidden potential had been uncovered, and where stereotypes had been broken. And in that moment, they knew that this was just the beginning of a much larger journey.